Today, the Socratic idea of beauty being in the eye of the beholder is absolute mainstream. The context the man was preaching from is almost entirely glanced over. Aesthetic ideals are plummeting both in and out of the gallery, to the point where we are making the tail wag the dog, with the objective of minimalizing every evolution of one's disciplined individuation and cultural composition into an emotion, a feeling. And this includes our collective notion on beauty. Beauty runs past the superficiality of biddable gold diggers decimating a young bachelor's credit score. These are women with a marketable base who are wasting their lives and that no one genuinely cares for. This goes for men as well, as beauty also runs further than the self-adulating bigorexia so common in the fitness community, or more obvious is the morbidly obese computer gamer adding layers of cellulite over his once chiseled jawline in attempt of phony transient comfort against his daily mirroring reality. Our culture's standard of what is publicly agreed upon as beautiful exposes what we the people ultimately desire to invest upon. So, is there such a thing as truly good or a beautiful? I mentioned two polar extremities under the same roof, one excessive, while the other none. Is everything simply relative and a product of conditioned interpretations, as social justice warriors have been adamantly evangelizing at the college campus? If we explore Plato's golden ratio, we all react to body symmetry with attraction. But beyond this, there is quite obviously Darwinian references being implied. What I'm alluding to is the eugenics on how we determine potential mating prospects based on the candidate's reproductive fitness. Because contrary to popular thought, you can judge a book by its cover. What you see is what you get. Ugly people tend to be in the ugly inside as well. A man with confident body language is often seen with a smile on his face for that very reason. The external presentation your body conveys is a representation of your internal decision-making history. Your shape is heavily dependent on your character. You look this way because you have chosen to. Clearly, we are not all 6'3" toned Adonises, and that the subject ultimately is catered to those who are not married yet, as the most fattening meal of a girl's life is the wedding cake. But, as you pretentiously sit in your falsely bought cerebrotonic high stool of being a lethargic intellectual who solely puts his attention onto the deeper or finer things whilst having no dating options, keep in mind that we should aspire to be so. Today, the average man and woman in America weigh 20 plus pounds more than the average weight held in the 1960s. In only 50 years, the American people managed to produce a new standardized baseline from 140 to 160, and 160 to 190. Yes, you heard that right. Women weigh as much as men used to. Sure, this is also a combined phenomenon of higher accessibility to processed foods, sugar-entrenched fluids, and the corollary of the golden age of bodybuilding. And I hear the rebuttal that nothing is more unattractive than an incredibly vain individual who seems to take an hour getting ready, glancing himself over so desperate to practice schoolyard one-upmanship, unable to hold a conversation outside his narrow narcissistic periphery. I also understand we are not talking about bone structure here. Even though your genetics are everything on the matter, we all understand the basis of imagistics and its critical importance professionally, but we seldom neglect the personal prevalence of aesthetic presentation and this new cult of willingness towards the ugly, the blind. Every monumental civilization has held objective visual standards as a universal packaging precept for their civility. The Egyptians' notion of Ma'at, or the order of the universe, had an element of beauty in the conception of their worldview itself. They had a wife of the great Akhenaten, or the slightly large nasal septum, yet still glorified Cleopatra. The classical ideal in ancient Greek marble statues through Dionysus and Aphrodite, or my favorite, the bronze boxer of Quirinal, or the Chinese Taoist and Confucian emphasis on fashioning oneself with extravagant garments, ideally silk, and elegance with one's bodily discipline as the hallmark of beauty. While they differ in degrees, they all carry a repetitive theme of the woman embracing their feminine aesthetic and the men yielding their organic vehicle through testosterone channeling practices. I'm of course referring to the gender-bending bungee jumps that seem to take place every week. What do you think this does to our pedagogical ideals? Let me quickly glance that while this applies to men, the absurd trend of body positivity is hitting women a lot harder due to the fact that men will communicate amongst one another bluntly whatsoever the topic, where women do not. On top of the reality that men are the more visual creatures of the two. The lasting results apply fundamentally towards white democratic women, as the inclusion of more socially stratified and spherical to belong is a highly liberal tendency. For men, the problem seems to take the polar extremes of either being an absolute land whale versus the oddly vain metrosexual beautification competition against their female companion. So let me ask you, when was the normalization of shortly cut color plastered hair, short height with an excessive obtuse frame, riddlement of tattoos, facial piercings, and salacious promiscuity, contradicting the very adoration of the untapped, ever progressively attractive? Are we so stuck in the short term that we can't see the no makeup movement or fat shaming and thin privilege phenomena as merely symptoms from a crop of women with low marketing value, using estrogenic gymnastics in an attempt to have weak men hypnotize? It goes like this. One's biological gender, rather than social construct, sets forth the genetic script. Then that very genetic script desires to find optimal mating prospects. The signs of optimal health are then reinforced through societal standards of that which is beautified. And as we scan each other's bodies as complete strangers in order to visually notify whether or not they are worthy members of our varying in-group standards, just know that your excess weight will conceal your genetic baseline. We take for granted that in men, we want a chiseled jawline, a strong posterior chain, and taller height than their manipulative counterparts. When men do not have any of the latter, they are then expected to compensate by either going to the gym or earning more money. Likewise for women, the instinctual desire for the hourglass curvature, clear skin complexion, and feminine fashion are rarely met. And I am sorry to say that women do not attempt to make themselves redeemable due to their overall prevailing laziness and self-adulating personality. They instead double down on the negative by demanding an acceptance of the gravitational pull they produce, while at the same breath perplexed as to why dominant men find them hardly noticeable. So concluding, they say you should never ask a woman how much they weigh. I strongly disagree. We have a stigma towards high school dropouts. We have a stigma towards teenage pregnancy. We have a stigma towards smoking. We have a stigma towards anorexia. We once had a stigma towards tattoos and single mothers. We have a stigma towards adultery. We have a stigma towards excessive piercings and welfare dependency. And you bet your fat asses we have a stigma towards the obese. Stigmas are a good thing. They keep us in line. By labeling the communication as fat shaming, we are cutting out the very incentive towards becoming both healthier and aesthetically sound members of our society. As the left continues to publish the morbidly obese along with transsexual men on the cover of Vanity Fair and Vogue magazines, forcing us to re-examine what we organically find off-putting, we should aspire towards that which is instinctually beautiful, as Jung referred to as the archetypes of the warrior king and the nurturing creator. Because while I guarantee that nothing will assure you not getting laid more than a little Schopenhauer talk on your next date, what is a definite close second is weighing 20 pounds over your profile image.